We're back for another episode of Capes and Tights, a comic book and pop culture podcast. I'm your host, Justin, and that's Paul, guest co-host. Actually, technically, the second week in a row, because where we record a week in advance, basically. So Paul's episode of slabbed comic books or graded comic books,
slab or no slab,
released last week, and then this week will be this episode talking about Doctor Strange. Adam is moving. So Adam is moving technically tomorrow as of this recording. But we talked and we're like, let's give you some time off, man. Don't stress about the podcast. Don't stress about anything else. Get your stuff, your shit in your truck and move to Illinois. And so he's like, oh, I can figure it out. And so I said, no, I'm going to tell you that you can't. This is it.
Just
You're getting kicked off the podcast for a couple of weeks.
I
so
can't
you
imagine,
can go.
Moving's a pain in the ass. I can't imagine moving that far.
Yeah,
like,
I moved from Haverhill or Andover, Massachusetts, back to the Bangor area, which is about 3.5 hour drive ish.
Yeah.
And that was stressful to me because I mean, like when you move across town, you can make multiple trips. If you forget something,
not a big deal.
If you buy a house, you can start putting your stuff in there like slowly or whatever. When you leave us from state to state, you're basically like, I'm going and everything. If I forget something, I forget something, and that's it. Especially going halfway across the country, technically. I mean, Illinois is pretty much halfway across the country.
But it's about dead center, I would say, from here.
And so,
and then you got to pack the family and everything else. It's not even just him; it's just it's everybody.
It's everything. And then so like the moving truck, I think, is showing up on the 12th, and then it's like a couple of days of helping move, and then they're moving out there and they're getting to their new place and moving in around the 18th or something like that of the month, and then I don't know. So I basically said you have until the 25th where we record again off, and he said thank you. So I mean, this is an episode he was kind of looking forward to, but in the same sense, like, hey man, shit happens. And he literally texted me, goes, oh my God, we just sold the house. Like it was like in no time. And so it was a surprise to him too. So
the way the market is insane. So
yeah, and it's like basically as is too. That's what I heard. It's like just basically like, hey, we'll take the house. That's it. Do you want us to do this? Nope. Do you want the house? I'm like, oh, okay. I love this house. It was a cute little house. But even him, I don't know if it's in Little City in Bangor, and it's a
nice neighborhood.
It's a nice neighborhood, but it's like your intersection is Broadway, which is like one of the worst roads in Bangor area for me to drive on. So like I hate being in that intersection. I can't imagine every morning getting up and like having that
going
be
through that Broadway, Center Street, interstate combo mess there.
Which is awesome because the people we have fans listening to this podcast who live in California are like, what the hell are you talking about? If you ever want
people are dealing with way more traffic than in
if you
sunny
ever
Bangor,
want to visit Bangor, you'll know avoid Broadway. Basically, only need to go to Hammond Street, right? I mean, that's the only place you need to go in Bangor.
The only place I'm aware of.
Yeah, 547 Hammond Street.
Maybe hit the downtown OBC tasting room.
Yeah, see, there you go. And we're right there. You're all you need to do right there. Actually, I did yesterday on the way home.
Reasonable walk, like it's a little ways from there. You could get
walk there, Uber back.
Yeah,
I'm not walking from here. I can walk to a brewery, but I don't know about walking back from a brewery,
especially uphill. It'd be all uphill from here. That would suck.
But we normally just talk comic books on this podcast, you and I, and this is comic book related, obviously, because it's a movie based on comic books. But we just are gonna shoot the shit about Doctor Strange and get us in the mindset for a new movie that's coming out at the beginning of May, which is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And one thing I wanted to touch on the top of this just before we get into the actual Doctor Strange movie is it's kind of funny. I figure that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is more like what Civil War was to a Captain America movie. If that makes any sense, that Civil War has so many other non-Captain America people in it. Right. It became like an Avengers, pseudo-Avengers movie. And I feel like this Doctor Strange movie has so many people in it, or supposed to be in it, or theory to be in it, that it almost is like a pseudo mashup movie or like a team style movie. And that's just kind of funny.
I was reading all about a new character being introduced to the MCU in the movie because I spotted them in a brief real quick. I'm like, oh, hey. And then I looked up like, oh, yeah, they're going to be making their debut in it. And
so with Wanda being in the new one and obviously Doctor Strange and all the other people that are going to be in it, it's like, it's okay. There's so many other people in this movie that, I mean, at least like the Spider-Man movies, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen Spider-Man, there's multiple Spider-Mans in it. So I can understand it being a Spider-Man movie. Yeah. But with Doctor Strange, it's called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. which it could just be called Multiverse of Madness.
Multiverse of Madness, just let it fly. Yeah. Don't even give it the Doctor Strange title of being the sequel. Just make it its own. Yeah.
But the original movie, Paul, came out in November 4th of 2016. It's been almost 6 years. That's pretty crazy to think about.
Crazy. Still very well done too. Like all of the special effects and stuff held up extremely well, I thought.
Very well. I mean, it was made for $236.6 million. To me, it's insane.
It better hold up.
Adam and I are talking about the Star Wars movies too for our Star Wars week, and the little amount of money, those like $115 million Star Wars Episode 1 was made for.
Yeah,
it's just double that, and it's just funny to think about. Yeah,
how much of that the sets of Star Wars were all made by a single person making these ships? They're being filmed like, it's your cost of it back then was probably considerably less. You didn't have all this computer graphics and 100 people working on the background stuff to make all of the images work.
Exactly.
That was probably like 5 people in a room. Like a little different.
It is, and it made $677 million. That's a good return on your investment, right? I mean that's pretty good.
I would take that. Yeah, I'd be all right with that, I guess.
For movies
that's
now,
a solid GP.
It's unbelievable how Morbius is not doing that. We're a couple weeks in now, and I just read an article last night that Morbius is at 123 million globally or something like that. It had a 75% drop off from weekend 1 to weekend 2. Like Friday night in the movie theaters, that Friday night after the original release, it made like $3 million.
I keep hearing these constant like mixed reviews of it, but I think because of mixed reviews, because I'm not the biggest fan of the Sony like universe they've created, and I'm honestly just not a very big Morbius fan.
Yes,
I'll just wait till it comes out. Like my wife and I love going to theaters. Like my wife absolutely loves going to theaters, and I'm probably not gonna bother going and seeing Morbius. If it fell in my lap, like the opportunity to go see it, sure. But I'm not gonna go out of my way to go see it. And I haven't heard that much great about it. If everybody was saying, "Oh, you've got to see Morbius," I'd probably be more inclined.
Yeah.
But where it stands right now, I'll get to it when it comes out eventually.
And the difference between like a movie like this, like Doctor Strange and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness coming out, we're all as comic book or superhero movie fans, we're all hoping it's successful because we want the next thing. Like you want that next Marvel Cinematic Universe movie because they have like a kind of a formula that they've been able to do, and it's been good. Whether you're
outside of Eternals.
Well, whether it's the best movie you've ever seen or not, at least they have this formula that they've been able to like make movies that make money and are not horrible. Like they're not like you walk out in the middle of a movie kind of thing. I mean, some people might feel like that, but like there's most of them do well enough, or at least since like Thor: Dark World or Incredible Hulk. Some of those movies, people were like, if that was made now, he probably would have walked out of it and so on. I do give some of the movies that came out during the pandemic era some leeway in a sense that some of it has to do with filming and writing and release schedules and all this stuff that maybe like that's why Eternals is like got that little like that bit to me where it's like
not good. I did not like Black Widow either. Not that this is what we're here to discuss today, but I wasn't a Black Widow fan either.
But a bunch of people did. So but my point would be is the Morbius thing is I think that most of us are like as Marvel Cinematic Universe fans are really hoping it's crap, because if Sony realizes any movie they make that doesn't have Kevin Feige involved in it doesn't make them any money, then maybe they'll start working on only MCU films or some sort of selling rights back or like leasing rights.
To Marvel
and
we'll let you guys handle it. We'll just kind of take a bit of credit for it or something. Like that would be good, I think, because the Sonyverse stuff is generally painful, I feel like.
Yes. And it's the same thing with a lot of us in the Fantastic Four movies. A lot of us are like, when the Fantastic Four, the third Fantastic Four movie came out, we were all kind of like hoping it would bomb, because at that time we're 7 years or so into the MCU. We're like, we want Marvel to have Fantastic Four back.
I think there's a fair amount of people that don't even know that movie exists.
Yes, and that I would probably, but I haven't even seen it yet. But I've heard that Morbius is in the same realm, so we'll get to that when that comes.
Painful.
But this movie was well liked. It was 89% critic rated and 86% audience rated, which is pretty cool. Scott Derrickson did this, did the some Spider-Man movies stuff, and he also was pretty much a horror movie director when this movie came out.
Interesting.
Which makes me think that it kind of, I mean, it has that aspect to it. If you think about it, all the movies, you put all the movies out there that are Marvel movies, this has the most horror genre
one of my notes to this was that this was a very dark MCU movie. Both, I felt like it was dark in the overall filming of it. It didn't look like your standard Marvel movies. It had that, much darker images and stuff, but plot-wise as well. It didn't follow the happy, chipper Marvel stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that makes sense that it was done by a horror guy. So that's cool.
Written by Derrickson with a couple other people, and then Kevin Feige obviously produced it. Michael Giacchino, who did Spider-Man, Rogue One, Star Trek, and Pixar soundtracks, did the music, which you can kind of see. Obviously starred Benedict Cumberbatch, Chiwetel Ejiofor, it's a hard name to say, Rachel McAdams, Benedict Wong, Michael Stuhlbarg, Benjamin Bratt, Scott Adkison, Mads Mikkelsen, and Tilda Swinton. So the funny thing about this movie, it's funny how it's Benedict Cumberbatch, right? And Benedict Wong, and Benedict Wong's name in the movie is Wong. And two of the main stars both have the first name Benedict, whereas a name that you don't hear that often.
Not a common name.
Fun facts about Doctor Strange and this first movie, obviously. But we can dive right into some of it. So it's funny that I laughed the very beginning cold opening scene where he's like getting scrubbed up. I wonder if anybody went out to the movie theater and saw Doctor Strange, they had no idea about the character at all, and was like, "Oh, I didn't know he was an actual doctor." Right.
Yeah, if you don't know the background.
There's definitely those movie people who didn't know that.
Yeah. I felt like the origin in this movie was well done. It followed very much the original origin of Doctor Strange, but was very enjoyable to watch on screen. Side note, I went into this movie not the biggest Doctor Strange fan. My uncle absolutely loves him. It's one of his favorite characters. And my uncle and I grew up reading comics together and stuff like that. And that was always one of his. So I wouldn't say I had a huge predisposed opinion of Doctor Strange. But after watching the movie, I have read several different major Doctor Strange story arcs because I enjoyed the character that much. So that gave me that kind of launch point from the movie.
Which is some of the things that I love talking to people about, is the idea that the MCU, we're all in this, like you're a comic book store owner, and one of the things that you're hoping as a store owner, just for profit's sake, but also to get comic book fans, is that maybe they'll watch a movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, coming out here in a couple of weeks, and then come in and buy previous back trades or comic books off the shelf. Exactly.
Yeah, or start collecting from there. Say, hey, you know what? What's out right now that involves this character, and start up with it. So sure, absolutely.
One thing we've talked about that you and I had to shop is just like surprising they haven't they kind of did. I mean, they released Strange, and they did the Death of Doctor Strange and all that stuff recently to give you the Doctor Strange name is in people's minds before this movie comes out.
It's in practically almost every week or bi-week print right now.
Yes, so that you have that ability to know who Doctor Strange is, who is currently, obviously, the movie theater version of Doctor Strange is a little bit different than the current book form of Doctor Strange. But the name is at least out there. But I'm glad they don't do it like the beginning of the movie. Like, make sure you check out your Marvel comic. It would seem cheesy to make it more of a commercial,
self-promoting. Yeah.
And the fact that the comic book characters are different than the TV characters, so it might piss people off being like, "Oh, I bought Strange, and it's not the exact same thing as Doctor Strange in the movie theater," kind of thing.
Right. Super confusing to people if they pick it up and have no idea what's going on. So I would say, in my opinions, Benedict Cumberbatch was a spot on actor choice for Doctor Strange. It's like the Chris Evans Captain America and the Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man. I think they nailed it. I think they got Doctor Strange perfect. He was amazing at the role. I love his overall arrogance of the character when he starts, as he wouldn't have had his issues come up if he wasn't so arrogant. That scene where he's driving the Lamborghini there and he's just flying through traffic, and you're like, if you didn't have this I am above all mentality, none of this would have happened to you in the first place.
Correct. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the origin story for Iron Man. Where he was kind of cocky, and it's obviously the same thing, driving in the car, going to the airport from Iron Man 1. There's this complaint from people that this is more of a blueprint that they use from Iron Man to this movie, where there's this connection between billionaire or rich people who are arrogant, and that here's their origin story, how they did this. They went to a foreign country, da 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 da, and it's like very similar in those aspects. But I also feel like this is the last one we're gonna get like this after the success of some of these movies, like Shang-Chi, where it's like you kind of get like he is Shang-Chi, and then you kind of get like this is how he became Shang-Chi quickly. And with Spider-Man, it's like with No Way Home, or sorry, Homecoming, it was like, oh, Spider-Man has his powers, and in conversation mentioned, I got bit by radioactive spider, and so on and so forth. You don't really need to dive right in.
I mean, how many times do we have Spider-Man's origin? We don't.
Correct. Really don't. I think also they'll do it for Fantastic Four. Like they won't actually be like, here's a spaceship, and they're going into space, and cosmic rays, and da da da. But I think this will be the last one of that way. The way that's basically like Doctor Strange, the Doctor, to the Sorcerer Supreme in a movie. I feel like it will either be you'll get someone's origin in the Multiverse of Madness, and then you'll see them get their own movie. I don't think we'll see many more where it's like from scratch, Ant-Man's, where it's like he's just Scott Lang and then he becomes Ant-Man and those kind of things. I think we're going to be in that more either if or from another movie to another movie, and this solo movie is just a continuation of the previous movie where they found their origin story in it.
I think it was a good choice to do the entire origin of Doctor Strange because as big of a character as he is in the MCU's comic universe and how long he's been around, there's still plenty of people that don't know that character. We talked about at the beginning there, how many people might have gone and been like, wait, he was actually a doctor? Like, they didn't know that origin.
Yes.
And getting into the importance of the choice, right? Because you get in the movie where he could use the magic to make his hands work perfectly.
Yes.
And just go back to his life, or he can go forth and try to do for better good of humanity and move on to become the Sorcerer Supreme eventually. So
do you think it was just as much of a big swing from Marvel? They started off with Iron Man, right, in the MCU. It's a pretty big swing for some people. Again, Iron Man, what your kids see as Iron Man nowadays is not the Iron Man that we knew. Like it wasn't as like when you go to the store and everything's Marvel, it was not Iron Man. Like it wasn't like all your posters you see about Marvel and all the things of Iron Man and Spider-Man and all those things on it. It was basically Spider-Man.
Yeah.
On everything. Iron Man had taken over.
Spider-Man and Hulk, I think.
Yep. Iron Man had taken over the mantle of the iconic Marvel character after 2008, really. And this is a big whip. Guardians of the Galaxy was a big whiff because no one really knew who the hell Guardians of the Galaxy was unless you were a huge comic book fan. I think Doctor Strange was in that. He was on that periphery of obviously Iron Man, Hulk, Thor. Those are the ones people already knew. But Doctor Strange was one of the ones where I'm like, I could take it or leave it. Like you just said, I don't really care as much about it. I'm going to go see it. It's an MCU movie. It's going to further the story of the actual, phase, whatever it was. But yes. But I definitely going into it thinking about that originally. And every time I watch it the same way, where I'm like, I could probably skip this movie. It's not my wife's favorite by far.
Right.
Is I could probably, but I don't, because I want to get in there and I want to like, okay, there's a reason behind this movie that makes sense. And Benedict Cumberbatch is an amazing actor, like in general. So I like watching his acting, and I think he did a great job. And then Rachel McAdams did a really good job as well. She was supposed to originally be Pepper Potts.
No, I did not know that.
They offered her a role as Pepper Potts, but turned it down because she didn't want to be in a Marvel movie. But then realized later on, when this movie casting came out, she should have been in a Marvel movie because she would have made a bunch more money.
Well, I think the casting for Pepper Potts was very good too. I think that was properly done. So I don't think Rachel McAdams would really fit as Pepper.
It'd be different. It's honestly hard to see, hindsight's 2020 because you don't actually. When I picture Pepper Potts in the movie, I don't picture Rachel McAdams because she wasn't Pepper Potts. If that makes any sense,
right? But I mean, growing up reading Marvel things and this and that, like Pepper should be kind of a tall redhead, and Rachel McAdams is neither tall nor redhead. So,
no, but you mentioned the car scene, driving on the phone.
Yeah.
Did you get the hint that the Air Force colonel that was crushed, his lower spine in some experimental armor, was a nod to the person that was injured during Justin Hammer's testing in Iron Man 2? Connecting the universes in a weird way. So this is one of the few movies that if you watch this movie, there is no actual connection in the movie to the MCU. Like there's no crossover between characters in the actual movie. You're talking post-credit scenes and all that stuff aside. Is you're saying from the beginning of this movie to the end of this movie, you could technically, someone could watch this and not realize that they're in the MCU.
Right.
Except for hints like that.
I was so we're back to watching the movies with my daughters in the order of their releases. So this one had to get us out of order to watch it. And I was thinking it was referencing Rhodes after the battle during the Civil War scene. So this is pre-Civil War.
Yes. And so there's that aspect. So if you remember that when they're in the they get summoned by the government to like do the thing, and they show he overtakes the screen.
He screwed up like everything. Yeah, that
it's a lower torso. Experimental crushed spine thing. Yeah. And so they're connecting that. There was a couple other things too. I heard on a different website that said something about like these small nods that were to the MCU, but really, we're kind of like the way that I'm rewatching the Netflix Marvel stuff, or now Disney Plus, because they switched over to Disney Plus with it.
Right.
And it's kind of like those things where they'll like mention like the Devils of Hell's Kitchen, but they won't say Daredevil, and like the guy with unbreakable skin kind of thing, and Ant-Man when they said we got someone a guy who climbs on walls. Like those are the kind of ways of connecting things that are not basically saying Spider-Man or Daredevil or whatever. So I kind of like those nods to just say, okay, I want to show you that we're in the same universe, we're in continuity, but we don't need to put Iron Man in this movie for you to understand that.
Yeah. There's no scene of Iron Man flying by or, Spider-Man swinging off a building or something. It just gives you that little idea of it all.
Yeah. The last thing about that little car thing is don't drive and look at your images on your phone, your screen, or anything. You're going to get in a big accident unless you want to become Doctor Strange. That's a different story. Then do that.
That scene is definitely I don't know how he would have survived that crash. Like that car, for being a high-end sports car, apparently was well designed to take that kind of crash, because that was a hell of an accident.
Yes. And it's funny too, because if anybody's watched the What If series too, that's a good one. They had Doctor Strange episode where he lives that over and over. That was a very good episode again, because of the time travel part of it. But otherwise, I mean, as a whole with this movie, the special effects were unbelievable. I loved that it had this like Inception feel, but also like
every time they entered the mirror dimension.
But the mirror dimension was perfect because it made it seem like a mirror dimension to me. You can't just mirror what's outside, because then you as a viewer, like they will know because they're in it.
Yeah.
But as a viewer, you wouldn't know, like if they start doing things like, oh my God, they're tearing buildings down. You're like, oh wait, they're in the mirror dimension. You have to remember that. By making it look different was pretty cool. So you as a viewer
manipulating whomever is in control at that battle of the moment is manipulating everything around them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old were able to follow along that whole plot and understand the mirror dimension, and that they were in a different world than our current world and things like that. They were, they were able to follow through all of that through how well they did the cinematics of it. So I was impressed. I didn't really have to explain much to my girls. They followed right along with what was happening. Because there's a lot. You're dealing with magic. You're dealing with them opening portals. You're dealing with, time-space continuum. And my girls followed all of that. So it was obviously a very well done movie that, your family could follow.
Yeah. It's also funny. Up until this point, you have like Hulk obviously is a superpower that happens because of an accident in a sense. Like, but Iron Man is an Iron Man suit. You have Thor, who's a god. You don't really have at this point in the MCU many characters that have superpowers. If that makes any sense, like they have either he's a god, which obviously he has superpower. All gods have some sort of superpower. Iron Man has a suit. You have say even go to Ant-Man's and things like that. Those are like a suit again. So you don't have that many. Some form of your Guardians of the Galaxy are all like just like Star-Lord technically is just a human being.
It's his technology again.
Again, there is some superpowers out there, but like if you think about it, this is how people would explain superpowers if you didn't know superpowers is magic. And that's where like if I were to explain to someone, like if you just simplified superpowers to someone, it's magic. Like that's a simplification of what superpowers are to people. So it made sense for me to have Doctor Strange be in this universe and have this magic. There is this sense of too much power that we have this conversation that, Adam and I or someone will have at some point with Captain Marvel when we get there, is that is there such thing as too much power? And I feel like there is something to say about Doctor Strange and his magic and having pretty much unlimited ability to do anything
he wants realistically. But then you get into the things like the rules that are being followed, and his responsibility to stick to those rules and the consequences of breaking them, that you can get into some of the interesting things of why he has to be still limited by it, right? Because if you start twisting too much and you start having things like the overall villain Dormammu, you could open yourself to that kind of being coming into your world. So it gets into some of that interesting ideas that, yes, you are the Sorcerer Supreme and you have all of these abilities, but there's a cost to using them all.
You become Darth Vader, right?
Right, yeah, pretty much, right? You give into the dark side.
Speaking of Dormammu, kind of disappointed, honestly. I'm kind of disappointed. I was kind of disappointed in Dormammu, honestly, when they got to that point and you're like, oh my gosh, we're finally going to meet it. And it was just this weird floating face. Head. Yeah. It didn't seem ominous to a point where like this all powerful being it didn't scare me. Like it was like, not scare me, but you know what I mean? Like, it didn't portray what I thought it should portray. And it seemed simple for Doctor Strange to think about beating Dormammu. Like it just, I just need to make him annoy him, basically.
Right. I like the way he beat him because, I mean, I think unique. A big battle scene with this being that you're trying to make so above anything that we can handle would be a challenge. You know what I mean? It's anytime you make your villain this like cosmic or godly being, and you get into how are you supposed to defeat it, then you're like, oh well, he beat it, so it really wasn't that big of a deal, maybe. So in this case, did he beat it? Dormammu? No. He did not beat Dormammu. He just gave him the ultimate weapon against him was time. Like, guess what? This is gonna be it. You're gonna be living this forever and ever and ever, and I'll just keep dying and tough luck.
He just annoyed the shit out of him.
Yeah. Eventually, Dormammu was like, all right, screw it.
Tell you what, it would beat me. If someone just said, I'm gonna poke you for the rest of your life, like, screw this, I'm done.
Yep, that's it. I've had enough. But no, I agree. Dormammu on screen, and that's a hard character, I would think, to do and have it on screen well. But I would agree it was kind of disappointing. It was kind of quick. You get that glimpse of him there when Doctor Strange is opening his eye, that third eye. In the comics, you see a lot. And he's going through time and space and dimensions, and you see Dormammu for a glimpse. But I would say, I didn't find him to be. It was quick and not really intimidating or not.
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah,
but it also the movie didn't take away from the movie. I just thought it was one of those things that I looked at it, I'm like, and watching it over again. It's like the fourth or fifth time I've seen the movie, and it's like still every time it doesn't resonate the same way. I feel like other villains in the MCU have resonated with me.
I don't know like, how I would have done it differently though.
I don't know either. I just to me it was like almost a letdown with how the magnitude of the movie was happening. That it almost was a letdown that this is just I don't know. It just seemed weird to me at the time. Like I felt like if I would fought entire video game to get to the final boss and that was my final boss, I don't think I would be as happy. Head. Yeah. Like it just did. Honestly, like I said, I don't know what else to do because obviously there's connections to the comic books and all that stuff too. But like, I don't know how to fix it. But I just know that one of those things that always is like, it didn't jump out at me and go, oh my God, that's badass.
Yeah.
So, but
that's like the dark dimension was very like neon-y and not really. I don't know. It didn't have that terrifying feel. You know what I mean? If it was done more of like a hell image of fire and brimstone stuff, maybe that would have been more instead of this cosmic-y, multicolored. Yeah.
Which is somewhat I think they're going to be doing with Multiverse of Madness. It seems like some of those images from the trailers and stuff like that are very dark, scary, buildings floating away, just like things that are frightening. The one thing I think of Adam and I talk about a lot on these movies is the appropriate amount of humor. That this movie is a pretty serious movie. He lost the use of his hands. He is a doctor. That's how he makes his money. He has ego. Obviously, has to deal with that. And it's about harnessing this power and the dark dimension and all this stuff. But yet they still have the ability to throw in things. And my always statement on the podcast is everybody farts at a funeral, or not everybody. Someone at some point farts at a funeral. The idea that someone makes a joke at a funeral, like we go to funerals, a sad moment for a lot of people, but there's no such thing as a perfectly 100% solemn time. Like even when a natural disaster happens, it's not like somewhere else in that time, someone down there is like, oh, I'm glad I didn't bake that cake last night. Like someone jokes
Right.
about something that would have happened because it's part of healing. It's part of
Yeah.
moving on. And so I do like how Marvel's been able to do this. Movie wasn't a comedy at all, but the idea that like when he introduces himself as this Mr. Doctor, he's like,
Yeah.
Mr. Doctor. He goes, no, Mr. It's actually Doctor. So Mr. Doctor. And he goes, no, it's strange. Maybe it is, but who am I to judge? And it's like those kind of things. It's like funny because it is funny name, Doctor Strange. And the fact that he still goes by Doctor.
Right.
Like, after the fact that he's no longer
right. He wants to make sure he holds that title, which
and
is
the name that they call him Strange. I love the
kind
name
of
Strange.
Arrogance of the character.
Yeah. And then there's also like the Wi-Fi password joke where it's like, what's that? He goes, it's the Wi-Fi password. We're not savages. And those kind of things too, the Beyonce part of it, those kind of fun, just
him stealing the books in the library while Wong's listening to Beyonce.
Yes. And so like that stuff is funny to me because I think it would happen. It doesn't take away, and it breaks from the solemnness of some movies can be for a moment, just like, and then you're back to the serious part of the movie. That's my opinion.
I had one scene I was not a fan of in the comedy where he puts the cloak on and straightens it and is like all serious, ready to go. And then the cloak starts like messing with him. And he's like, stop it. Like,
do you know whose idea that was?
Whose idea was that?
Benedict Cumberbatch.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny. I did not love that scene. I thought to me, it's like the Hulk scenes where you're waiting for that big Hulk moment and then they didn't give it to you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't.
The one thing I do like about the cloak of levitation having its own mind, is a cool thing. And I do think there's one scene where he wipes a tear, the cloak wipes a tear away from his eye, which is a good like I've got your back kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like that stupidness of like it's screwing with you. Kind of like what Adam and I complained about Venom 2, where like Venom was too much of a hormonal teenager. That like there was just this too much of this joking back and forth between the two that it's like, no, this is a serious like this is not from the comic books. Like there is a jokes here and there, but like Venom eats people's heads.
Yeah.
Like the cloak of levitation is a serious mythical history
entity
passed down to multiple people thing that you should probably not have it be like screwing with you and playing like hide and go seek and slapping and playing tag and all that stuff.
Yeah. That was a scene I wasn't a huge fan of. So let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on the villain Caecilius in this? The Caecilius, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, his eyes were creepy as hell.
His eyes were creepy. Yeah, I agree with that.
I don't know. It showed to me like the eyes thing. It's the whole thing about this COVID pandemic thing we've been going through is that I said to myself, like, we probably would have been over this in 6 months if when you got COVID, you got this like big wart on your face because no one would want that visible thing like you had it and you obviously were able to just stay home. It's fine, whatever, you did your thing, got past it. But if it was like visible, you wouldn't want to be seen. I feel like everybody would have been like the safest possibly they could because they're like, screw this, I don't want this like scar on my face from this big wart. Same thing with this, the dark dimension does this to you so you look hideous. Like you could go through your entire life harnessing the power of the dark dimension, but if that's what you're going to look, then people are going to know, hey, you're a craphead. That gets the cost behind it. So I that was good. He actually, his name is Mads, the actor, lost track of scenes because of all the CGI.
Oh, like really?
He didn't know where he was because it was basically a green screen. And he's like, what scene are we doing again? Which is kind of funny.
That makes sense because there's got to be a lot of green screen in it.
I don't know. Again, the villain in this movie, I almost feel like if you break it down and ask me, Adam and I talked The Dark Knight a couple weeks ago, and The Dark Knight I felt like the first movie, the villain was Gotham in a sense. Like obviously it was Ra's al Ghul and it was
and it was Scarecrow,
but like Gotham as a city was like, we was fighting back against the city. And I feel like in this movie, it was like Doctor Strange fighting against his ego. Like his ego was the actual villain of the movie more than Caecilius and Dormammu, but
it was him becoming and accepting what he was becoming more than anything. Yeah.
Without watching the movie, without watching the movie right away, like say, hey, go watch the movie and tell me who the villain is. If someone watched the movie when it came out in 2016 and say, tell me who the villain is, they likely aren't going to be able to answer me unless they've seen it multiple times and they remember the movie specifically. Yeah. That's the reason. That's the whole point about how I don't think that Caecilius was strong enough as a villain.
I did not remember exactly who the villain was while watching it. I think I saw it in theaters. I probably saw it one more time post theater, so I usually watch again when it comes out. And then now with my girls, we all watch it as a family. My issues with him were he he was not in the movie all that much.
Yep.
I did not have a whole lot of feelings about him overall. Like I didn't really care.
Yes.
Let's just say, we got this quick backstory that he came to them broken, that he lost his family, and that's why he's obsessed with stopping all time and all loss and essentially like, look, everybody will lose, but then we all gain type thing, and no one will ever lose somebody again. So I could kind of get the mentality they're trying to put behind him, but I feel like overall, as a character, I didn't have that much interest in him as a whole, and he wasn't on there like screen time. He wasn't really there that much besides fight scenes.
Yes, there's this thing that my wife and I were talking about. We were watching The 100, it was on CW, and we read the books. And in the books, like you felt cared for the characters in the books. Like you felt like this person, like I actually care what happens to this person, whether they're a villain or a hero. You've cared for them. In Loki being a villain in the first few movies of Marvel Cinematic Universe, like you understood why he became a villain because of his being adopted, and you have a little story behind how he got to that point. In a lot of these movies, on Yellow Jacket, in Ant-Man, you kind of have this connection. You feel for this villain in a sense because he feels like he's being slighted at his own company and they won't give him the technology. And so there's this connection you have to this. And I don't feel like they gave us enough of a connection at the beginning of Caecilius to make me care about Caecilius, to care that he is evil, but he shouldn't be. And we want to help him in a sense. We want to get him away from it. Correct. And so I feel like there isn't this connection that makes me feel love or love for the villain. Like I read The Walking Dead or watch The Walking Dead, I feel love for Negan because I feel bad that the way he became Negan was the story behind him. And that shitty stuff that happened to him turned him into Negan. And
that villain origin.
Yes, there is no villain origin really for him. It's just, like I said, that was what we're going to probably see in Marvel movies for heroes in the future, but the whole like flashback or like quick story. But I don't feel like it was enough of a rooted caring for, like we basically got the description of who he was at the beginning of the movie before we even cared about the whole idea.
I don't know if we really even figured out what Doctor Strange was in the movie by the time you'd already like kind of gone past what Caecilius's deal was. I mean, basically you get him, he murders someone right in front of you, very like kind of gruesomely, decapitates them, and you're like, wow, whoa, okay. And then a quick fight scene where they're trying to stop his escape.
Yep.
And then he's just kind of gone again.
Yeah. And then he shows up here and there to fight.
And mention of him, I think, of like the fear of Strange becoming like him from the Ancient One. She makes a quick kind of reference, and with Mordo, they're going back and forth a little bit. And I think that's kind of the only origin you get to him, any backstory of him. There was no like scenes that I would say that would have been good of like him losing his family or him coming to them broken, him becoming obsessed with releasing the dark dimension into our worlds. Something like that would have done a lot, I think. But I think due to the time restrictions of the movie and how much you wanted to get into the magic and the effects and of course the origin of Strange, we limited Caecilius to the point where I had no real caring of him.
I mean, nowadays, this movie came out in 2016, so it's still technically nowadays, but 6 years ago is an hour and 55-minute movie, which is honestly nowadays for a Marvel movie or a superhero movie is what, 30 minutes to 40 minutes shorter than what it would be. So maybe you would have gotten that if they would have made it nowadays. They also could have just switched the timing on it. I feel like the opening, like showing the Caecilius thing at the beginning and not like, let's go and to Cumberbatch and do the stuff with for Doctor Strange, and then have a flashback in there explaining who Caecilius was somewhere further in the movie when I had a care for Cumberbatch and for the Sorcerer Supreme and Tilda Swinton and all those things. The timing of it all was a little bit off on that to give me a more thing on it. Well, speaking of Tilda Swinton, the Ancient One, obviously we know as comic books as an old white or Asian dude with white hair. And them switching it up obviously was a big pushback on a lot of people who thought they were that comic book fans rooted in the fact that it was a male in the comic books and they switched it to a female. But then the big thing about whitewashing, about how they made a white lady the Ancient One. And so it is a weird casting. I do think they took some risks and I liked it because I think she was bad. I mean, Tilda Swinton's badass in everything she's ever touched. But I think she took it and grabbed it by the gonads and did it. And it was a great, in the end, when you see that she was casted as the Ancient One, you're like, what? But then you see it happen, and I'm like, okay. She also didn't have that much of an impact on the entire movie either. It's not like she was in every scene.
Right. She had a fair amount of screen time. Her battle scenes were epic.
Yes.
She was great in the battle scenes. I liked her as a teacher. And I feel like you did feel some of her burden and responsibilities as being the Ancient One, as being the Sorcerer Supreme, of how much that wore on her. And in her final scene where she said, I've seen this spot in time over and over again, but never passed it, and sort of knew this was coming, and yet here I am after all this time. I'm still trying to stretch out a last moment. Like that was, they gave you a bit of sadness, I thought. Like it gave some feeling to that character's death. Some understanding that she's not above all things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. At the end of it, she still was human.
Yes.
Even after living for as long as she had, even though they never actually cited exactly how long she lived.
And I think they were trying to make a change by making it a woman. And it was obviously there was a kind of like the stereotypical, you walk in there, oh, who's the Ancient One? Where is he?
Here's this old Asian guy sitting there, and then it was a surprise that it wasn't him, it was her. And I think the stereotypical idea of it being an old Asian guy with long hair would be kind of,
but the other question I had is, why couldn't you have made it an old Asian woman?
Right, an old
like
Asian
I love
woman,
Tilda Swinton, but it's the same thing with nowadays. Like I feel like we won't ever get Iron Fist again. Like Iron Fist probably won't be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe again, because the fact is we have Shang-Chi, and I feel like Shang-Chi is going to give you that kung fu side of Marvel, and that you don't need a white dude, Danny Rand, doing martial arts. I think you could just now do it, and I don't think they would recast him as, you know what I mean? Like they wouldn't recast him with Simu Liu. Like I just feel like nowadays you got it, we've seen it. Let's move on. Iron Fist has a connection to the Marvel Universe, but I don't think it's an impactful enough one.
You could pop Danny Rand in here and there and show that he's still Iron Fist, and Iron Fist is still doing what Iron Fist does, but we don't really need another Iron Fist season or movie or anything else, right?
No. So, but like I said, that was a weird casting, but I like the idea they went with a female, and it's going to piss some comic book, people off. But again, Adam and I mention it all the time. MCU is one thing, Marvel Universe is another thing. They're different separate things.
And it helps, once again, on my side of it, that I didn't come into it with a predisposed opinion of Doctor Strange and all of his origin and characters. So I had no feelings on the matter. And I just overall enjoyed her as the Ancient One. I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yes. And why Shang-Chi is not called Shang-Chi in the matter, the something of Kung Fu, is because they're so stereotypical. Well, just because we were awful people back in the 70s and 80s does not mean we need to continue being that. So if we're going to introduce these characters, tell us what, like having it be an old Asian dude is just stereotypical because of the fact that Doctor Strange is not. And so he's a Sorcerer Supreme, and he's not an old Asian dude. So like changing that up is a great thing.
You can't, no matter what, you can't win, right?
No, exactly.
We shouldn't have been this way and always had like your stereotypical thing done, but then we shouldn't be changing it either, because now we're making it stereotypical. There isn't a win in any of this. Perfect example, I was surprised with the casting in the new Batman movie for Commissioner Gordon. And while watching it, I never once thought of the actor as doing anything besides Gordon. He was fantastic as Gordon. Yeah. That's who I saw on screen. He nailed the role. So you get, and it's hard in the comic worlds, right? These characters were created a very long time ago. And, and if you are attached to them, you have a predisposed opinion of what the character is and should be. And sometimes you see it on screen and it doesn't match. But if the actor does a great job or actress does a great job, you move on quickly, I think.
Well, and that's the thing. But the other part about it is like you and I talked about the adaptations for comic books. So there's like comic books that sometimes come out, like Star Wars did it, The Force Awakens, and it's the adaptation of the movie in a comic book form. And it's like almost word for word. Like it's just basically it's like the same story. It would be boring as hell for all of us if we knew what the hell was going to happen in this movie.
Right.
Like if we knew everything about this movie.
Sit there with a comic from your past going, okay, so that's going to happen right now.
And it would be boring. Agreed. So the changing of things, I understand that. So there's definitely some things, and my brother would disagree with me. He thinks that it should be, he's a purist to the comic books and all that stuff and so on and so forth. But if that's the case, 99% of our movie are going to be white dudes.
Right.
Like, I'm sorry.
That's what they were. You know, these characters are created, some in the 30s and 40s, some in the 60s. But yeah, they were overall mostly a bunch of white dudes.
So I'm happy with the way that this is going, and I'm happy that like Marvel's going to do a PG TV show with Miss Marvel. Like, you know, there's some pushback on her powers.
And that's a character that's fun. I encourage young adult readers a lot to go to Ms. Marvel as a great action adventure story that gives a great little teenage feel to it. You know, I've encouraged my daughter to read it. When kids come into the store, they say, you know, what are characters I might like? And I go to Ms. Marvel and Spider-Man.
Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
Yeah, Unbeatable Squirrel Girl.
That
Miles
series
Morales.
from 2015 was awesome.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. Those are all great, quick recommendations for young adult readers. So I think the Ms. Marvel series will be a fun one.
So I wanted to talk quickly before we get into I want to talk about the couple of fun facts, and I also want to talk about Multiverse of Madness and just some predictions and things that are happening. I'll break down the trailer a little bit, but I don't want to go too long here. Is the first thing is the whole thing about when Rachel McAdams is like, it's you go to your cult, and he goes, it's not a cult. Yeah. She goes, that's what cultists would say. And he goes, wait, you can't leave. And he's like, I'm leaving. I'm late for a cult meeting.
That was a great scene. That was a great scene. And we talked about that humor, right? In that moment. Yeah. That was fantastic. Yeah.
But the question I have for you, I guess, is did Rachel McAdams, her character, accept the fact that Doctor Strange was this mystical, magical person too quickly? Was she like she questioned it? Like, what the hell are you wearing? Yeah. But then he removes his astral form and does this thing, and she just goes, okay, I'll perform surgery. Like, it was like so quick that someone was if someone came to you, if I just came in your store and my astral body came out of my body and you were just like, hey, what's up, Justin? Hey, what's up, Justin? That's what it basically felt like. And I understand that it was shorter and there needs to be this thing. And she did have some pushback, but to me, it felt like there's too many movies out there where you just have to agree with what they're thinking because you can't last forever. But I don't know. It seemed unbelievable at the time.
I would think it would be that shock moment. They showed her shock, right? When he breaks between the astral form and the human form there, where he's kind of floating in a mirror in space, right? That happens. And you know, she's a professional dealing with ER stuff. So she's dealing with his physical body here. Maybe it's like a state of shock, right? It was just like, well, whatever. And then I love when they go in the mop closet. He's like, yeah, I came through a portal in the mop closet. And she's like, look, if this is how it's going to be, just don't tell me. And then they go to the mop closet. There's the portal.
And then he goes in, and then she turns around. She goes, what the hell? And the mop falls, and it scares the shit out of her. That's, again, comedy that's funny because that's what would happen in that moment. Even if you're in shock and it's a serious moment, you just did surgery on this dude, is that the fact that the mop falling over would happen and it would make you scared, and it makes us as an audience laugh. And
I think all that was perfect. And then if you're in her position, what do you do, right? Like, what do you? I mean, you just see him break through this dimension type, and then you're working on this body, and you know, then he goes through and he's dressed like this. What else do you do in that situation from her aspect? I mean, it's just the whole thing would be shocking, and you could probably get into a little mini series about her time after that of like, what the hell just happened?
Yep.
You know what I mean? And because that'd be your next thing, right? Like, what did I just see? How does all this work? And then you would think she would start becoming obsessed with finding this all out, right? You'd have all these questions you want answers to.
And I think you have time constraints, and there's times that Adam and I have talked to this on the podcast, is sometimes you just have to go with it. Like, you just have to go, okay, that's fine. Most people probably be freaked out and not even wouldn't be able to perform a surgery because they're so freaked out, but she just went with it. And you kind of have to just believe that this is not real, Paul. Like, this is not a documentary.
Right.
It's not real.
You got to figure she's an ER specialist, right? I mean, she has to deal with gunshot wounds and with every other, you know, event that can happen, and the crazy things I'm sure you would see in a ER of a major metropolitan city like New York City, that you just, whatever, you just keep doing your job, right?
I do say, so this movie is in general, this movie is connected to the MCU in a sense, but if you're trying to do a truncated version of the MCU, that this is actually one of those ones that you can, I don't want to say skip it because it's really good, watch it, but you could skip over, because if you just want to take Doctor Strange who he is, then you can watch Thor Ragnarok and see him work with Loki and Thor in that movie, and then you see him in other movies, as Doctor Strange just saying, okay, I know who he is. We do introduce the time stone in this movie, but no one actually talks about it being it's not like this is like, wait, Thanos is going to come for this.
There's a reference that it's an Infinity Stone,
but that no one that knows like, oh, Thanos is coming. So you don't need to know about that in a sense. Like it's okay, you can do it, which is nice. You can also watch this movie if you don't want to watch all of the MCU because of the fact that it's not inundated with the connections to the other films. So it does do a role on both those things. The post-credit scene with Thor is fun. The whole filling the mug stuff, that's pretty fun. You do see in the other post-credit scene where he goes and removes the powers, the mystical powers from the dude that he met in the movie.
Moto
making him crippled again and stuff like that. So post-credit scenes were great. There's nothing crazy. I mean, it led into Thor Ragnarok with that post-credit scene. And that second scene just shows he's taking the powers away again, but there hasn't been a connection to that yet.
Which I'm thinking will be interesting, trying to get back into the sequel to Doctor Strange. And we've seen that Mordo will be in it. And what the hell has he been doing all this time? Like, he's obviously obsessed with the idea there's too many sorcerers. And he's going around. You would think at some point Doctor Strange, while being busy with the Infinity Stones and with Thanos and with all the things that are happening to Doctor Strange, would still go, I might have to go deal with this guy.
Yeah.
Like, this seems like a problem. But I guess we'll get there and see what happens in the next movie, right?
And I wanted to nip in the butt quickly is the idea that people always complain about, well, at this moment in time, 2016, when this movie came out, the Avengers were a thing. Other superheroes were a thing. So the world was about to come to an end because of the dark dimension and no one came and helped. But the theory I have on that one is Doctor Strange is the only person that can help.
Yeah.
Like there's
Thor's not going to, I mean,
Thor maybe,
but like
Iron Man, is Hulk is going to do something. Ant-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, like they're not going to be any match for a dark dimensional spiritual being like that. So it makes sense in this one
that might be able to do something.
Yes. So there's that. Did you know that quick fun facts? Benedict Cumberbatch almost didn't make the shoot. He was the first top choice for the role of Stephen Strange, but he was also committed to play Hamlet on stage. If they didn't have him, the second choice would have been Joaquin Phoenix, but Joaquin Phoenix would have turned down the role because he didn't want a multi-movie commitment.
Interesting.
Morgan Freeman was almost considered for the role of the Ancient One.
Also interesting. It would have been a great thing to see. I wonder how that would have gone.
And then James Gunn shot Stan Lee's cameo in this movie. You know, they're on the bus.
Yep. Yeah, that bus scene.
That was actually one of Stan Lee's cameos. They shot 3 in the same day. They shot the Doctor Strange one, the Watcher, and Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and the third movie was speculated to be the one in Spider-Man Homecoming. They shot all on the same day, and then Derrickson picked the one that he wanted. Obviously not the space one, but there was other ones he got to pick through, which is pretty cool. It actually,
they probably could have done the space one still of Strange going through time and space, and then just real quick, the Watchers all standing there and him talking.
It makes sense to me. Like they could have done that towards the end of Stan Lee's life too, is just done a bunch of them and try to figure out where they fit in the movies. But I still think that Deadpool should take over for Stan Lee's cameos. I feel like Deadpool should just be in like the background of a movie, every single Marvel movie.
Just that fourth dimensional breaking.
It's just like all of a sudden they're like all over the driving on the street and he's like at a coffee shop sitting at a table or something like that. I think that was funny. And then 2 other Doctor Strange movies were attempted to be made. One in 1992 by Wes Craven, which again would have been kind of cool, honestly. Yeah. And then again in 2001,
definitely horror,
from Guillermo del Toro. And then David Goyer, who did The Dark Knight or co-wrote the first Batman Begins. He co-wrote that. Was hired to write and direct one as well. But then in 2008, Del Toro pitched one, but none of these projects ever materialized. Again, weird things for me that like in the 1992 that they thought Doctor Strange would be the one to do a movie.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like why go Doctor Strange? Because he wasn't as mainstream, maybe.
That's possible.
Maybe they thought you could go more open and people would go see it for the horror side of it, for the magic side of it, and it wouldn't just be like I have to be a comic fan to get it. Like,
well, that's what the second movie. So if we get quickly into the Multiverse of Madness coming out on May 6th, is Sam Raimi is the director. So Sam Raimi obviously did the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. but he's also known for his horror movies. So this movie, it's got horror elements in it to like probably 10 times as much as what it was in the first movie. There's a big part of that. And Michael Waldron, who wrote the Loki series on Disney Plus, is the writer for this movie.
Which I very much enjoyed the Loki series. Yeah. So
which also leads a lot of people to believe that there's going to be a lot more connections between those two series. If the guy who wrote the Loki series about what happens in the multiverse in that series and then multiverse part of this movie.
Yeah, you're getting like the sort of police to the timeline, all that, but ultimately like the Sorcerer Supreme should be in charge of guarding the timeline and guarding all of these manipulations. So it would make sense to have Doctor Strange in that whole thing, which would be an interesting like mix of how do you do Strange with this.
I would have loved to see Strange in Loki. That would have been cool.
Yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch obviously returns. Basically, a lot of people from the first movie return, but they added obviously Elizabeth Olsen and Xochitl Gomez, who plays American Chavez.
Yes.
And everybody else who returns from the other movie. The music's
that was the very quick blip, and I'm like, hey, that's American Chavez right there in the coat running.
Yep. And then exactly. And there's some other things I wanted to point out.
He's gonna be a major.
I want to point out some notes here in a second, Paul, about a bunch of the things that I've seen, that I've read online and things like that. But Danny Elfman's doing the music, famous Danny Elfman. That would be cool. Danny Elfman from, I'm not going to list off of his resume because it would take us an hour just to do.
Right.
So Sinister Strange looks like it's going to appear. Defender Strange, Zombie Strange are all in this movie. It looks like we're getting some Ultron Sentries. I mean, there's the multiple comic books or trailers that are out there, just like American Chavez, obviously. The potential villain being Nightmare, which is a pretty cool villain. Captain Carter possibly in this movie. There's a part in the movie, the latest trailer that was on TV, that American Chavez and Doctor Strange fall through this dimensional thing, and in that dimensional thing, they fell through a dimensional reality that has dinosaurs, which is badass.
Which could give you like Devil Dinosaur.
Yep.
You could get into a lot of other Marvel characters.
Even if you don't, like I said, even if they don't talk about them, if they're just there or they have a connection to there.
Those quick blips of seeing them.
Yes. But in the top left corner, in that exact same scene, is an animated cartoon reality. So the connection to possibly putting What If in this connection of it. Or sense. I thought, guess what's coming up here pretty soon is X-Men 97, the redo of the original cartoon. So it'd be kind of cool if that's tie in some of that stuff.
Right. Well, and I was just thinking Spider-Ham too, if you wanted to get into like the whole Spider-Verse.
Oh God, that'd be amazing. That would be so amazing. The big one we want to chat about really quickly is the Illuminati. Like that's the big thing with 2000s Fox-owned X-Men movie having Professor X in it. And there's also this thought process, that timeline is all screwed up over at the X-Men universe. So the idea is this is probably the X-Men from X-Men 1. Right. You think about it, like the first X-Men movie, you're talking back in the day, X-Men. But the Illuminati in the comic books, Paul, right, is Strange, Doctor Strange, Professor X, Iron Man, Namor, Black Bolt, Mr. Fantastic. Black Panther was asked to be in the Illuminati, but declined originally. So obviously, Doctor Strange is being brought to the Illuminati in this trailer. We think. So obviously,
it seems that way with the potential that was Patrick Stewart's voice. And
correct. Is it possibly Sorcerer Supreme Mordo from a different dimension, different reality? That is in his spot. Superior Iron Man is a theory also that could be in this. That the Ultron Initiative worked, and also Reed Richards is possible to come into this as a whether it's from the original Fantastic Four movies or they actually bring in
a new actor
as Reed Richards, and then Professor X, obviously. So it'd be interesting to see all that. I mean, it would be kind of cool if like, Black Panther's sister, what's the hell's her name? Shuri is the Black Panther on. Like, there'd be kind of they could do anything and I'd be happy. Obviously, seeing Namor in there would be badass, or Black Bolt, but like, I think those
introductions, which they had the Inhumans, but let's just leave that out for altogether.
I think the Inhumans stopped, and that the theory on that one is that they started getting the discussion with Fox to get the X-Men back, and the Inhumans originally I think was going to be the MCU's mutants,
right?
And so they were doing this. There was supposed to be an Inhumans movie, and it ended up not coming to fruition. I think that's because they didn't want a confusion between what Inhumans are and mutants are. And when they thought, okay, eventually we're going to bring mutants in, we want to forget about the Inhumans part of it. And so I think they're not going to do the Eternals,
which are their own entities, but close enough to all of it to confuse anybody.
Yes. Yeah. So Ultron Sentries, they saw that. They saw a what if possibility in here. Mentions the truth, perhaps the MCU. And all we know is actually not the universe's core reality, that like we're actually one of the side realities to the core reality, and that we've been actually living in an incomplete post House of M reality where mutants have been erased. And that's why we don't see anything wrong with it.
That's why we don't see mutants.
That would be interesting.
Which gives you some of that WandaVision stuff, because WandaVision was very much House of M.
And think about it, there's actually a clip of Doctor Strange and Mark and Chavez going through the front of the screen. Their faces are all blocks. And that is almost identical to the Scarlet Witch cover B on one of the House of M covers. I think it was by Quesada. I think it was by Joe Quesada of her being pulled apart by blocks. And that's a House of M connection in that aspect of it too. So this funny thing about this kind of stuff is that we might actually end up seeing some of the things that we thought we were going to see a long time ago. Like we thought WandaVision was going to introduce House of M. And so like it's hard for you to find House of M trades and all that stuff because people were buying them all up. And then we were like the whole 2020 into 21, we were like, oh yeah, you know what's going to happen? We're going to see Mephisto. And we haven't yet.
Everything is Mephisto.
I feel like now they're going to
still people are pointing going
Multiverse of Madness is going to be like, okay, here we go. House of M, Mephisto. We're just going to throw it all in this movie. So you better come see it and see that stuff too. So it's going to be super interesting to see. I was so pumped to see Spider-Man No Way Home. Like it was like the movie that I was like, oh my God. Part of it was core MCU character. It's a sequel. Whereas the Eternals and Shang-Chi were introducing new characters, so there was nothing really to grab onto. Doctor Strange is going to bring back Wanda. They're going to bring back Doctor Strange. A lot of the characters from the Doctor Strange movies. You might potentially see Professor X in there. You might be able to see new, other characters that are going to be on this Illuminati. Potentially Deadpool. There's talks about that they won't probably introduce the X-Men because I feel like they're not ready for that yet, and there's not that. But it's possible they could still cross over the universes by putting Deadpool into this universe, showing that there's a possibility of Deadpool down the road. That makes me want to see this movie. Who
doesn't want to see Deadpool in any movie anyways?
And Ryan Reynolds, man, he is. Yeah. But this makes me want to see this movie so much. And it's like, now it's becoming that movie over how much I wanted to see No Way Home. It's now becoming that, like, seeing those trailers and seeing that speculation, like what's going to happen. Like, I have no idea I could not predict right now what's going to happen in this movie.
This is going to be it's like a great launch point to doing the next level of Marvel movies. And it does. They've done it perfectly to set up to, like you said, you can have anything. You can introduce anything you want. This could go in any direction.
And I love the idea of connecting all the past. Like, why is it, if we live in a world of comic books, that there's a multiverse in the comic books, right? Why can't there be one in the movies? And why can't the X-Men from the early 2000s be another reality, another universe? Like it can be in another universe. And technically wasn't it the Fox universe for a while there? It was like X-Men, and there was like the Fantastic Four universe, and then there was Spider-Man universe, and then there was the MCU. Why can't there be a X-Men universe that's on Fox that's from the early 2000s that we see for a blip? Oh, cool, Professor X is in this, and we never see again.
Right.
They close that dimension off. It's there, but now anybody who's ever watched a Marvel movie can go, it all connects in a weird way, but it's not. Professor X we see in the MCU part of it might not be the Professor X that we see in the Fox part, but there's a reason why, and it's because it's a different reality. I'd love for them to bring back friggin' the Captain America from the early 90s. I'd love to see Nick Fury played by what's his face from I always do this every time Adam and I talk about this, from Baywatch. The hell of me.
David Hasselhoff.
David Hasselhoff played a Nick Fury in the movie on a direct-to-DVD.
Get Dolph Lundgren as Punisher again?
Yes, like do that. I don't care. Honestly, bring them all in here. Honestly, if they were to show a blip from the unreleased Fantastic Four movie that you can find on YouTube right now, I would freaking watch that. I think it's funny to do all of them and just close off the ones that you don't ever want to touch again, but make them all continuity.
But they all could have happened. They all could. They're all out there somewhere.
How funny would it be if Nightmare was introduced and they show the Fantastic Four movies from the early 2000s, and it's like it's a nightmare. Like this is a nightmare of what the world could look like. This shitty movie.
This is what Doom could have been. Oh God,
that would be funny, honestly. But you know what? It's gonna be fun, dude, and I'm like so excited. I do think that this is definitely, honestly, I'll put the money on it right now. This is gonna be one of those few movies that the sequel is better than the original.
I think that's a very high possibility, and I overall enjoyed this original movie. But yeah, I think it is, and it's always great in sequels where you don't have to get that origin story.
No,
you already had that, so you can move on to the next thing. You already know who this character is. You already have a love for him, and you're excited to see him again. So,
and the pandemic didn't help, but it's 6 years since the first movie. That's a long time. We haven't seen that really much. Yeah. I mean, Thor Ragnarok was that one where they're now getting the fourth movie with Love and Thunder. So like it's the first first MCU movie to get a fourth movie with their name in it. So like 6 years. I mean, obviously, like I said, this movie probably would have been released a year ago.
A while ago.
Yeah. And it honestly was already supposed to be released right now. It was supposed to be released in March. And so it being delayed till May is another delay as well. So I'm super excited. And the only thing we have after that, Paul, is freaking Thor Love and Thunder, which is now the shortest time between the release of the movie and the release of a trailer. It's broken the record of, I forget what it was, Incredible Hulk. That there was the shortest time between the release of a trailer and the release of a movie. Every day gets shorter and shorter because we still have yet. We're recording this on April 11th. This won't come out until April 19th. So there's a possibility in those 8 days that we get a trailer, but still, it may be the possibility we won't get it until.
Have been dropped. You can now see what the action figures look like, which is some of the first images of what is coming in that movie.
Yes. And to connect everything together, Paul, Dark Knight we did a trilogy review last week or 2 weeks ago. It's in this movie technically and then April 10th was the 30th anniversary of the movie Newsies, which I first got introduced to Christian Bale in. And so all of this is connected in a weird world. It's amazing. So
and then you can watch Shaft, where Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury beats down the broad.
See, it's all connected. Listen, I want Nick Cage as Ghost Rider in this movie for 5 seconds. Then
you'd be the only person.
But then get him out of there. Like I said, make it continuity, but then just forget about it. Like, who the hell was that dude? Or
Nick, have a quick glimpse of him of Nick Cage in the Superman suit that they were gonna do.
Yes.
Back in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Right.
How about have Nick Cage be the first person to play two different characters in the same Marvel movie? Have him come in as the animated version of Spider-Man Noir.
Yep.
With a mask on, but just voicing him. And then have him come in as Ghost Rider in the same movie. Have the first person ever to be play two different Marvel characters in the same movie.
There we go.
No? Well, okay.
It's a possibility. I think
I
would, as long as the Ghost Rider scene is fast and gone, because
it was bad. It was bad. But you know what? There's a lot of bad things. We are luckily, Paul, we have lived long enough in our lifetime where we could say we thank lucky stars, like we talked about not wanting to see Morbius that much, but the fact that every month basically now for the next foreseeable future is a new comic book related something coming out. And we're living a world that happens. And that's really cool for us. And I'm excited to see the future of whatever happens. And on yesterday's poll list, which technically, because this comes out the 19th, on the 18th poll list for Justin, there is a DC book on there. So you have to check that out. It's a DC book.
Yeah, it's a stretch, but it's a DC book.
So we'll have to check that out. But yeah, Paul, 547 Hammond Street, Bangor, Maine is Galactic Comics and Collectibles. You find them online too, and find them on Whatnot. Check out Whatnot.
Yeah,
I was on there the other day making fun of them. I didn't buy anything, but I also thought it was stupid for me to buy anything because I'm like, I can just go into your shop and buy it, not pay shipping. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. I love it. Adam and I don't rate movies when we're on these things, but we do basically the stay home and watch it or go to the theaters and watch it. And I think that it's a one or the other. I think this is the kind of movie where if it was on Disney Plus released at the same time it was in the movie theaters, that it's probably one of those ones that you could just see at home. But I do think the special effects and everything is cool enough to see in the big screen.
I was just going to say, I'm glad I saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
I'm glad I saw it on the big screen. I'm glad I got the effects of it in the big screen. Because all of the filming of it was fantastic and still holds up today.
Like I said, the storyline itself is a stream at home on your big screen with the popcorn and beer at home. The actual production and creation of the movie is a cool big screen sound effects.
The magic battle, the battling with magic and with the mirror dimensions and with the flipping of time and space was all amazing, and it was great to see on the big screen.
We're going to add another category to this. Those who live in the greater Bangor area. You have the watch at home on your big screen with your beer and thing. You have the in the theaters, right? And in the middle, you have your Queen City Cinema Club, where you go watch it on a slightly smaller screen. You still get your home experience, but you get your theater experience as well. So there's the middle now. So I think that's the one.
Yeah.
The one in the middle.
Go to Queen City. And they will give you a button you can hit, and Josh will bring you more beer.
Yes.
I know.
Or a brewing company beer, right?
That's right.
But check out Paul on Facebook, Instagram, all those things. Galactic Comics and Collectibles. And then you can check us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have capesandtights.com as well as Apple, Spotify, all those crazy things on there as well. Thanks for filling in, Paul. Adam, we're very grateful. Adam's probably, I want to do, when the first episode he comes back, we probably will do a little like what Adam wanted to say about Doctor Strange and see. I almost texted him and say, hey, could you send me some things? But again, I'm trying to let him do his thing, and I'm only going to send him memes in the meantime. So sweet. Thanks, Paul. We'll catch you this weekend, according to this episode, at the Bangor Comic and Toy Con, April 22nd to the 24th at the Bangor Mall. Pretty cool.